Do you steal together? Why are you supporting her?
Old man stood patiently in line. At 68, Malcolm Pierce had learned that patience revealed more about people than questions ever could. Cornerstone Coffee's flagship store hummed with Monday morning noise. Espresso machines hissed. Fresh roast filled the air, exactly the atmosphere he'd spent 30 years building. The cashier glanced at him for less than a second, then looked past him at 3 office workers coming through the door. Welcome back. The usual? Free pastry samples hit the counter before they'd even ordered. Malcolm waited. Their drinks got made first. Only then did she turn back. Next. What can I get you? Medium dark roast. 512. No name. No eye contact. Transaction complete. He stepped aside. A black woman in scrubs joined the line. The specific exhaustion of someone ending a night shift, not starting a morning. Before she reached the counter, a man walked in carrying a golf bag. "Mr. Harris, we'll take care of you right away." The cashier smiled. Warm, immediate. The smile she hadn't offered once since Malcolm walked in. Then she turned back to the line. "You'll have to wait," she said it to the nurse. But her eyes moved past her. Malcolm didn't react. He simply watched. That wasn't impatience. That wasn't a bad morning. That was a choice. Made so automatically she didn't even know she was making it. The golfer ordered first. The nurse waited. Malcolm's coffee came out several minutes later, not because it was complicated, but because it hadn't been started until everyone else's was done. He carried it to a window table and looked around the room. Nobody recognized him. Not the cashier, not the manager, not one customer, just an old black man buying coffee. Which was exactly the point, because Malcolm Pierce wasn't here as the founder of Cornerstone Coffee. Today, he was Michael Carter, a trainee, first week on the job. And before the week was over, the people who'd overlooked him would discover they hadn't just misjudged an old man. They'd exposed something rotting at the center of everything he'd built. But the people behind it weren't who Malcolm expected. The manager was only the beginning. By Friday, he'd discover the person protecting it had been sitting beside him for nearly 30 years. 7 days earlier, rain against the windows of Cornerstone's Charlotte headquarters. 12 directors around a walnut table, every face carefully arranged. Malcolm turned his wedding band, 42 years old, the only thing on him that wasn't plain gray. "I've made my decision. I'll be stepping down at the end of the quarter." Richard Evans leaned forward first. Silver-haired, precise, a board member almost as long as Malcolm had been CEO. "We've reviewed the succession plan." He slid a folder across. 12 candidates. Any one of them could start Monday. Malcolm rested a hand on the folder. Didn't open it. On the far wall, a photograph of a younger version of himself beside a woman with flour on her hands and light in her eyes. Evelyn Pierce. Every morning before opening that first cafe, she'd said the same thing. "Everyone belongs at the table." It had become the company motto, printed on cups, embroidered on aprons, repeated so many times it had started to lose its meaning. Which was, he'd lately come to understand, its own kind of warning. "I don't need another executive," Malcolm said. "I need a leader, and they're not in this room. The board vote is in 10 days. Then I have 10 days. He stood. "Richard, pull every complaint the Executive Review Committee has closed in the last 3 years. I want to read them when I'm back." What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Richard's pen stopped moving. A small, still moment. There and gone, before anyone registered it. "Of course," he said. "I'll have it ready." Like a man who'd already decided exactly how much of it to deliver. Malcolm didn't notice. Not yet. 3 days later, he walked into the flagship store carrying only Evelyn's worn leather notebook. Inside the cover, in her handwriting, "Watch quietly. People always tell you who they are." Near the office stood Madison Blake. early 30s, a smile that looked warm only from a distance. You must be the transfer. Michael Carter. A half-second assessment. Older than I expected. I get that a lot. She handed him an apron without introducing herself. Stay in your lane. This store runs smoothly because people know their place, said pleasantly. Like a courtesy. Like something rehearsed. Excuse me, you must be Michael. He turned. A young black woman, a coffee in each hand, curls pulled up, genuinely tired and genuinely smiling. I'm Danielle. Sorry nobody greeted you. It's been chaos since 6. She handed him one of the cups. I guessed black. Wrong. I'll make another. He looked at her a moment longer than necessary. 34 years earlier, another employee had stood in almost this exact spot and handed a nervous new hire a cup of coffee before he'd even asked. That employee had been Evelyn. Black's perfect, he said. She showed him around. Every few steps, someone pulled her sideways. Danielle, oat milk. Danielle, register 2. Danielle, table 7. She answered each without breaking stride. Each response precise. Each redirect sending exactly the right person to exactly the right problem. She wasn't absorbing chaos. She was managing a store that didn't know it was being managed. Assistant manager? Malcolm asked, unofficially. She didn't meet his eyes. Our district manager prefers a clean org chart. What's his name? Something moved across her face. The kind of stillness that comes from practice, from learning, over time, which subjects require careful words. Scott. Good at his job. A smile that stopped before her eyes. As long as things look right from the outside. She said it like a woman who had learned to say less. Malcolm filed it. Said nothing. Mid-afternoon, a tray of ceramic mugs hit the floor. A teenage employee stood in the wreckage, face white. Do you know how much those cost? Madison's voice cut across the room. Danielle was already moving, crouching beside him before anyone else reacted, sweeping pieces into a bin, her voice low enough that only he could hear. First rule, we clean up, then everything else. I'm probably getting fired. No. You're learning. That's different. 12 seconds. Every customer stayed seated. The fear left the room. Malcolm didn't write anything down. Some things don't need a notebook. Later. Restocking near the espresso station. Does that happen often? What Madison said? Danielle kept her eyes on the cups. Scott sets the tone. Madison follows it. People learn fast that pushing back makes things harder. A beat. I document everything. Every order, every complaint, every inventory request. She placed the last cup in line. Insurance. Said like someone who stopped being angry about needing it a long time ago. After closing, Malcolm stayed late under the pretense of restocking. Scott's office door wasn't fully shut. Regional directors loved your presentation. Scott's voice, unhurried, satisfied with itself. A short laugh from inside. Madison. Good. Keep sending ideas. That was all. Malcolm moved away from the door. Stood in the corridor with a box of cup sleeves in his hands. Keep sending ideas. He turned the phrase over. Not Scott's ideas. Not Madison's. Someone else was generating them. Someone whose name wasn't being said. He wrote nothing in the notebook. Not yet. Wednesday. He found it by accident. Danielle had left her spiral notebook on the prep counter. Open. Face up. Abandoned mid-thought when a customer needed attention. Malcolm glanced at it while refilling the cup station beside her. Then he stopped. Page after page. Drink concepts. Flavor combinations. Seasonal ideas. Ratios penciled in the margins. Ingredients crossed out and replaced, with careful reasoning written alongside each change. A full working portfolio. Her handwriting. Her logic. Months of work. He was still reading when she came back. Sorry, I'll move that. These are yours? Just ideas. She closed it without ceremony. I like experimenting. Do they go anywhere? A pause. Small, controlled. Sometimes, I send things to Scott. If he likes something, it ends up on the menu. She moved away before he could ask the next question. Malcolm turned back to the cups. Keep sending ideas. Now he understood whose. That night, after the store closed and the last car left the lot, Malcolm lingered near the stockroom. Scott's office light was still on. The door, again, wasn't fully closed. She have any idea? Madison's voice. Then Scott's. Never has. She just keeps doing the work. A pause. You keep doing the presenting. Malcolm stood very still. There it was. Said cleanly, casually. The way people speak when they've been doing something long enough that it no longer feels like wrongdoing. He moved away from the door, opened the notebook, wrote the first name it had seen all week. Scott Whitmore. Underneath, find out how far back this goes. Find out who else knows. Because Scott was bold. Bold enough to say it out loud with the door imperfectly closed. That kind of boldness doesn't appear from nowhere. It comes from having done it before. From learning, somewhere along the way, that no one above him was going to stop it. He drove home slowly, thinking about Richard Evans. About files assembled too fast for a man with nothing to hide. He called Ray Collins, COO, closest thing to a co-founder he had left. I need Scott Whitmore's full bonus history. Every HR complaint filed in his district. Everything that exists. How bad? I don't know yet. But I need answers before Thursday. He watched the dark road. Ray, how quickly did Richard have those complaint files ready when I asked? Silence. Next morning. 3 years of records. Next morning. A longer silence. I'll dig. Tell no one. He was almost home when his phone buzzed again. Ray. One more thing. Malcolm waited. Richard called me this morning. About what? Wanted to know why I was pulling Scott's district reports. Malcolm went quiet. I never told him I was pulling them. I know, Ray said. The line stayed open. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. Malcolm set his phone on the passenger seat and drove the rest of the way in silence. Wednesday. Malcolm arrived before the lights were on inside. Scott's car was already in the lot. The office door wasn't fully closed. I don't care what HR says. Scott's voice. Low. Certain. If corporate sees those complaints, they start asking questions we don't want to answer. What about Danielle specifically? A short laugh. The sound of someone who had stopped worrying about something a long time ago. She'll leave eventually. They work themselves to exhaustion, and one day they just stop coming in. No confrontation. No lawsuit. They disappear. A chair scraped. Delete whatever's still in the local queue. The printer hummed. Malcolm took a mop handle and kept walking. Scott stepped out. Said morning. Walked off without a second glance. A page sat in the printer tray. Half processed. Half shredded. Employee relations complaint. Filed by Danielle Monroe. One line survived. Repeated concerns regarding unequal treatment of customers and staff based on... Gone. Malcolm stood there with the mop in his hand. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't only endured it. She had documented everything, filed it formally, followed every channel available to her, and someone had made sure it never arrived anywhere. Scott could delete a complaint at store level. But across an entire district? Across years? That required authorization. Someone with board-level access, deciding, file by file, which truths were allowed to exist. He needed Ray's numbers. He needed them before the board vote. That night he drove to the original Cornerstone, a small company museum now. Dark except for one room. Evelyn's office. Everything where she'd left it. Handwritten recipes. The first employee handbook with penciled notes in the margins. On the wall, the founding principles behind glass. Every guest deserves dignity. Every employee deserves respect. Leadership begins with service. And underneath, in her handwriting, smaller than the rest, if these words ever become decoration instead of practice, we've already failed. His phone rang. She didn't file one complaint, Ray said. No preamble. She filed 7. She wasn't alone. 38 complaints across Scott's district. 4 years. Documented. Formal. Submitted through proper channels. How many reached the board? The pause before the answer was its own kind of answer. None. Where did they go? Rerouted. To something called the Executive Review Committee. Board approved. Created 3 years ago. Ray's voice dropped. Chaired by Richard Evans. Malcolm's hand went still on Evelyn's notebook. Richard. Who had pushed for retirement? Who had the complaint files ready the next morning? Who had called Ray to ask why district reports were being pulled? Reports he should have had no reason to know about. 30 years. His longest-serving board member. Get Angela on the phone, Malcolm said. I need legal in that store by Friday morning. He sat alone in Evelyn's office after that. Not because he needed to think. Because some things deserve a moment before you move. Thursday afternoon. The teenager from the mug incident appeared at the stockroom door. I got into community college. He looked at the floor. But my mom lost her job. I don't think I can make it work. Danielle disappeared into the back. Came out with an envelope. I can't take this. It's not a loan. He looked inside. $500. How do I pay you back? When you get where you're going, find someone who needs a door held open. Hold it. Malcolm was 3 feet away, facing the shelves. He'd told the board a story 10 days ago. About a man in a construction uniform who'd counted his coins twice at the original Cornerstone. About Evelyn wrapping half her sandwich and setting it next to his cup. About what she'd told him. When you're doing better, help someone else. About how he had, for 21 years, until he died. Danielle had never heard that story. She had arrived at the same truth, on her own. Malcolm turned back to the shelves. Counted nothing. That night, across town, Danielle sat with her laptop open. Letter of resignation. The cursor blinked below the heading. She closed the laptop without saving. Not because she'd decided to stay, but because leaving had started to feel like relief. And she knew, from hard experience, that relief and right weren't always the same thing. Friday morning came clear and bright. The kind of morning that briefly feels like a promise. Malcolm arrived early. Danielle's car was already there. He found her moving through the dining room before it opened, straightening chairs, wiping fingerprints from windows. Then she reached a small table near the front, where one chair sat pulled slightly away from the others. She stopped, looked at it, pushed it back in. You always do that, Malcolm said. She turned, surprised. Then, something softer crossed her face. My father used to sit there. Brought me here every Friday after work. A slight shrug. Can't walk past it without fixing it. Not silly, he said. Just love. The door opened. Madison walked in. Took in the two of them. Nobody's handing out medals for early arrivals. She disappeared into the office. Danielle returned to work. Malcolm had seen it. The brief tightening around her eyes. Not hurt. Something more worn than hurt. The expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything different. He thought about the resignation document she hadn't saved. He thought about the text from an unknown number. 4 words. Since disconnected. Don't let her resign. Whatever was going to happen today needed to happen fast. At 8:42, Madison's voice cut through the cafe. Where's the deposit bag? The room went still. Scott appeared, with a speed slightly too precise for someone who hadn't been expecting the question. It was in the office. It isn't there. Nobody leaves. Check the lockers. Jake's, empty. Lauren's, empty. Then Madison crossed the room and opened Danielle's. A black bank bag dropped onto the floor. Nobody moved. I've never seen that before. Danielle's voice was quiet. I swear. Scott let his disappointment unfold slowly. Reluctantly. Danielle. Of all the people here, near the window, a woman leaned toward her companion. She always seemed so nice. The verdict forming, before a single question had been asked. Which was exactly what this moment had been built to produce. Malcolm stepped forward. Can I ask something? This doesn't involve you, Michael. Who found the bag missing? I did, said Madison. Who had office access last night? Managers. Madison and myself. When did you personally last confirm the bag was in the office? Last night. Before close. And who closed the store? Danielle. So, Malcolm's voice didn't change. Danielle closed an office where you and Madison had accessed money, and then carried it to her own locker. From the corner, a customer said quietly. That doesn't make any sense. You're making serious accusations based on assumptions, Scott said. Then answer the question. This company has procedures. Good. Let's follow them. Malcolm held his gaze, starting with the security footage. Scott went very still. Corporate will investigate. In the meantime, Danielle untied her apron. The room went quiet in a different way. Her hands were completely steady. That, somehow, was the worst part. If this company believes I stole from it, there's nothing left to investigate. She set the apron on the counter. I resign. She walked toward the hallway. Nobody called her name. 7 years. And the room let her walk out without a word. Malcolm found her in the break room, sitting with her locker key in her hand. 7 years, she said. Not to him. Just into the quiet. Covered holiday shifts. Missed my sister's graduation. Sent a gift card from the parking lot because I couldn't leave. She set the key on the bench. Trained people who got promoted over me. Built recipes with someone else's name on them. Filed complaints through every channel I could find. She stopped. And in the end, I used my own locker. Malcolm sat across from her. Said nothing. I'm not even angry. Her voice was level. Dry-eyed. I think I stopped being angry a long time ago. Without noticing. I just kept showing up. If someone proved you innocent right now, would you stay? She thought about it. Really thought. No. Why? Because innocent was never the real question. She looked at the folded apron. The question was whether anyone here was willing to see me. And now I know. No bitterness. Just the flat, exhausted certainty of someone who waited 7 years for a verdict and finally got one. Malcolm stood. Give me 20 minutes. In the hallway, Jake stood with his phone. He'd heard every word. He reached for the app. Stopped. Looked toward Scott's office door. Looked back. Security recordings auto-deleted after 48 hours. He opened the app. Loading. Loading. His hand wasn't steady. 6:17. Nothing. 6:18. Madison appeared on screen. The deposit bag. Danielle's locker. 22 minutes before Danielle's car showed up in the lot, Jake stopped breathing. He went to find Malcolm. In the stockroom, Jake held up the phone. Malcolm watched the footage. Clear timestamp. Clear image. They'll fire me, Jake said. Possibly. Malcolm reached into his wallet and set a plain black card on the shelf. Malcolm Pierce. Cornerstone Coffee. No title. No logo. The color left Jake's face in stages. You're the founder. Yes. The whole week. He stopped. Why didn't you say something when they went after her? Because evidence that arrives too early disappears. And I needed to know who she was when nobody was protecting her. He looked through the stockroom window toward the hallway. Now I know. He dialed. Ray picked up on the first ring. We're downstairs. Come up. Scott appeared in the doorway. He'd seen Jake slip away. His eyes went straight to the phone. I'll take that. Jake didn't move. Malcolm stepped between them. That won't be necessary. This is an internal matter. It stopped being internal the moment someone decided what the truth was allowed to be. The front doors opened. Ray Collins, General Counsel Angela Brooks, HR, Legal, two auditors with locked cases. The cafe went absolutely still. For the first time all week, something moved behind Scott Whitmore's eyes that had never been there before. Ray walked the length of the cafe without hurrying, stopped in front of Malcolm, reached up, and unpinned the name tag reading Michael Carter, set it face down on the counter. Let the room wait. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder and executive chairman of Cornerstone Coffee, Mr. Malcolm Pierce. Lauren's hand went to her mouth. Arthur Jenkins, the veteran made to wait on Monday while the golfer was rushed through, rose from his table without being asked. Mrs. Campbell whispered to herself, I knew I'd seen him somewhere. Madison looked between Malcolm and Ray, and the name tag face down on the counter. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Scott stood completely still, behind his eyes, a rapid, private calculation, running backward through every morning he'd walked past the trainee without a second glance, searching for a version of events that still worked. There wasn't one. Malcolm untied the apron, folded it, with the same deliberate care Danielle had folded hers an hour earlier, set it beside the name tag. I've worn this proudly all week. It reminded me where this company started. Ray stepped forward. This store is closed to new customers. Everyone present is welcome to stay. Arthur Jenkins' voice carried across the room. If this has anything to do with what happened to Danielle, we're not going anywhere. No one moved toward the door. An hour later, chairs in rough rows, a projector on the wall, auditors working at a side table. The data came up slide by slide. Wait times by customer demographics across every store in Scott's district. Complimentary items by race. Service scores adjusted before quarterly reviews. Consistently, in the locations where the disparities ran deepest. 4 years of documented, calibrated inequality. Not accidents. A system. Statistics require context, Scott said. Agreed. Let's provide it. Malcolm nodded at Jake. The teenager stood, hands unsteady. Voice wasn't. He explained what he'd seen, gave the timestamp. The footage played on the wall, 30 seconds of silence. The kind that settles after something has been seen that can't be unseen. Did Danielle steal from this company? Malcolm asked Madison. She hadn't moved since the footage ended. No. Did you know she was innocent when you opened that locker? The pause answered before she did. Yes. Then why? She turned toward Scott. And Scott, who had managed every room he'd entered for 12 years, always a step ahead, looked away. A fraction of a second. She caught it completely. She was already a liability in his thinking, and he was done protecting her. He said she'd never leave on her own. That we needed to give her a reason. Angela opened another file. 32 seasonal drink concepts submitted under Danielle Monroe's employee account over 4 years. Each subsequently presented by Scott Whitmore as original proposals. Danielle closed her eyes. Name one ingredient from the original maple espresso draft, Malcolm said to Scott. Silence. Smoked cinnamon, Danielle said. No notes. No hesitation. Too harsh on its own. I replaced it with roasted maple bark, held the sweetness longer, kept the smokiness without the bitterness. That's what went on the menu, the way she said it. The specific, unhesitating knowledge of someone who built something with their hands landed harder than any accusation could. Scott said nothing. Malcolm looked toward the back of the room, where a figure had quietly taken a seat in the last row. I'm glad you could make it, Richard. Richard Evans rose slowly. 30 years of composure. Not a crack in it. Malcolm? Genuine regret in his voice. Not for what he'd done, but for where it had ended up. This conversation belongs in a boardroom. It belongs where the people it affected can see it. Angela began laying documents across the table. One at a time. Reviewed. Executive Review Committee. Chair, R. Evans. 1. 7. 15. 38. 38 complaints over 4 years. Not one going further than Richard's desk. Richard looked at the documents. His expression didn't change. That, the controlled absence of reaction, told Malcolm everything. You built a structure to receive complaints before they could reach the board, Malcolm said. And ensure they never did. I built a filter. Measured. Precise. Litigation is the largest reputational threat a brand at our scale faces. Uslish. Someone had to manage the exposure. Without my knowledge. You were grieving, Malcolm. A pause that cost him something. After Evelyn, someone had to protect the company's stability. So you decided grief made me easier to deceive. Silence. Richard didn't answer. Didn't deny it. Just held Malcolm's gaze, with the expression of a man who had prepared for many versions of this conversation. And not quite this one. You were protecting the company's image, Malcolm continued, from its own people. He moved to the wall where the founding principles were framed, stood near them. She wrote something underneath these in the original. If these words ever become decoration instead of practice, we've already failed. She put it there because she knew. The danger was never going to come from outside. Remove every executive involved, Richard said, and something in him had finally shifted. He was arguing now, not managing. And you destabilize the board, the investors, 30 years of everything you built. The company has already been destabilized. We've been too comfortable to admit it. Malcolm looked at him directly. Through 3 decades of meetings, grief, difficult decisions. You were my most trusted advisor. Your one job was to tell me the truth when no one else would. Richard held his gaze, then looked away. Angela placed 3 envelopes on the table. Scott Whitmore, Madison Ellis, Richard Evans, termination, effective immediately. Full audit across all 47 locations. Board notification before close of business. Scott stared at his name. Madison wept quietly, ashamed rather than surprised. Richard picked up his envelope, held it, set it down without opening it. Danielle had come back to the doorway. Malcolm crossed the room to her. This is yours, she said, holding out the apron. No. He reached into his jacket and handed her a folded page. His retirement announcement. With one addition, handwritten at the bottom. She read it. My retirement becomes effective only after the board appoints Danielle Monroe as interim CEO. She looked up. I've never run a corporation. Let me tell you what I watched this week. He didn't make a speech. He told the room what he'd seen. Plainly. The way you describe things you've actually witnessed. Monday. A veteran made to wait while others were served first. She corrected it without confrontation, without making anyone feel worse than they already did. Tuesday. Her own money. An envelope. A teenager who needed a door held open. Wednesday. 12 words to a frightened kid, and the fear left the room. Thursday. 30 customers at once. No manager on the floor, and every employee turned to her. Not because she asked. Because that's what people do when they trust someone completely. I cannot manufacture the ability to make people trust you, he said. Either it comes from who you are, or it doesn't come. The board chair spoke before anyone else could. Under emergency governance provisions, this board can appoint an interim CEO immediately. She looked at her colleagues. Permanent appointment will require a formal 9-month executive transition and full board vote at its conclusion. No one questioned it. I move that we appoint Danielle Monroe as interim CEO, effective immediately. Unanimous. Danielle pressed her hand over her mouth. Malcolm looked at Arthur Jenkins, who had been standing since the moment his name was announced. Ask him why he hasn't sat down. Arthur looked at Danielle across the room. I've served under good leaders and bad ones. The difference was never rank. It was whether they saw you as a person. A pause. She always saw me. Mrs. Campbell rose. Then the nurse. Then the nurse. then the nurse, then employees, then customers. One by one, unrehearsed, unasked, until the room was standing. Danielle's eyes filled. "I don't know what to say." Malcolm looked at her. This woman who had arrived at every lesson he'd spent a lifetime learning, without anyone teaching them to her. Who had held the door open, every single day, for 7 years, for people this company had decided didn't matter. "Start with hello," he said. "Then get to work." 6 months later, the store looked different. Not from renovation, from the people inside it. Turnover down nearly 60%. Customer satisfaction at an all-time high. Store managers now evaluated on team retention alongside revenue, because in her first board presentation, Danielle had made one argument. You cannot build a hospitality company on exhausted people. The numbers proved her right within 90 days. She turned down the corner office, kept a desk near the training center, worked one shift behind the counter every month. "I can't lead people I never see." The complaint rerouting system was gone. In its place, a direct line that went somewhere real. Jake ran new hire training now. The first thing he taught every class: integrity is what you do when nobody with power is watching. He always smiled saying it. Malcolm, fully retired, spent his mornings at the original Cornerstone, Evelyn's table. Medium dark roast. One Friday, a little girl bumped his arm and spilled hot chocolate across his shoes. Her father was mortified. Malcolm waved it off, bought her another, moved tables without a word. He was almost at the door when he heard a voice behind the counter. Danielle, crouching beside a new hire who'd knocked over a stack of cups. "First rule, we clean it up, then everything else." "I'm probably getting fired." "No, you're learning. That's different." Malcolm stopped at the door. She didn't know he was there. She wasn't performing for anyone. He smiled, pushed the door open, stepped into the morning, and let her get back to work. The strongest leaders rarely announce themselves. They're the ones who remember how you take your coffee, who make sure the new person feels seen, who use their own money when the system fails someone it shouldn't. They've been leading for years. By the time anyone with authority looks up and says, "Oh, it was you. It was always you." What makes that moment so powerful and so rare is that they already knew. They kept showing up anyway. Before you go, I want to ask you something I've been thinking about since I first heard this story. Danielle filed 7 complaints over 4 years, documented everything, followed every rule, and every single one of them was buried by the person Malcolm trusted most. So here's the question. At what point would you have walked away? After the first complaint disappeared? After the third? After you watched your recipes go out under someone else's name for the 4th year in a row? Or would you have stayed, the way she did, because leaving felt like letting them win? There's no easy answer. Tell me yours in the comments. I read every single one. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe. That's what we tell here. See you in the next one.